All right, Tom Lambert here with Shadetree Automotive. I got my man Braiden. This is the guy that is usually standing behind the camera making me talk to you fine folks about whatever crazy ideas we've come up with. So welcome, Braiden. We're going to talk about customer diag and repair and kind of some scenarios that you've gone through in your personal life here. Yeah.
Yes, sir. So you guys have asked, and I'm just trying to relay the questions. A question that we get a lot that I wanted to make a video on is actually a good one. People ask, what's wrong with me going on Amazon and buying a $30 cheapo scan tool, scanning my car when the check engine light's on, and Googling the first code that comes up, and then running to the parts store and buying whatever Google says?
Oh man, that's a loaded question. So first of all, I started out as a do-it-yourselfer, so I actually like do-it-yourselfers, even though I own repair shops. I'm not against, my knee-jerk reaction is I'm 100% not against people doing that. But if you're gonna do it, there's some things you need to know before you do it, and then you should probably pick and choose what kind of issues you do that on. So the little handheld scanners, honestly, that's very similar. They get you where you need as far as at least pointing you in a direction. What I would warn you though is if you hook up your scan tool and it prints out a code and it points you in the direction of a circuit, just because it says oxygen sensor circuit doesn't necessarily mean you need to go buy, say, an oxygen sensor. Right. That tool is just supposed to point you in the direction, and then it's supposed to take, then you're supposed to print off kind of a diag strategy, get some tools out, and actually do some testing to decide what to do. That being said, if you just take the code, put it into, say, Google, and Google what's the most common things, I would say probably 70% of the time, whatever part is most common based off that code will likely fix your car. Where I've seen it run into an issue is when it doesn't fix the car, and then people just kind of keep going down a whole wrong avenue, and then oftentimes we get cars come in that the customer's actually created a few problems going through and throwing parts at it. Maybe you get a bad part, or maybe VatoZone sells you the wrong part, you know, and then it just spirals out of control. And then by the time it gets to us, we have to go through and fix 4 or 5 things that have happened along the path instead of one. So if it's a part you can go buy for, say, a couple $100 and it takes you an hour or 2 of your time and you like to do it, might be worth the risk to you. It's just you got to know there's some risk. It's a little different than what an actual auto repair shop does.
Okay. Sweet. Let's dive into that then, because that was another question, is what is it that we're doing as an independent auto repair shop with specialty techs that's more advanced?
Let's talk about the most common check engine light. Let's just do check engine light diag, because that's probably the most common, right, is warning lights. Let's say we have a vehicle come in with misfire codes. Let's say it has a P0300, that's a multiple misfire code, and a P0302 code, cylinder 2 misfire. That's very common across all vehicles that they have those similar codes. Step one is to collect information from the client of, okay, what's it doing? How's it running? Does it change in the morning, afternoon? Mostly trying to gather info from our technician so that he can duplicate it, right? I need to know how long, what advice do I need to give my technician of how long he needs to drive at what time of day? Does he need to climb a hill? Does he need to go up the canyon? Does it only do it pulling out of the garage? All that information you got to collect from the customer. Then he hops in it, he takes those notes, he hops in it, and he goes and takes a road test and sees what he sees, feels what he feels, hears what he hears. If it's safe, I skipped a step. You got to make sure the car's safe to drive before you jump out on the highway there. Then once he pulls it in the shop, he hooks up, a factory level scan equipment. Whether it's if it's a European, we're using the factory tool. Or we have Aftermarket, we have Autel or Snap-on. Whichever one he feels is best for the vehicle he's working on. He'll scan all modules, print out a pre-scan report that has all the codes. Then he goes and a lot of times they'll actually know what those codes mean and what he wants to do next. But they'll usually go into a system that we use, like an Identifix, a Mitchell, IATN, and they'll research kind of all the recent cases of anything crazy people have found. And then they'll also look at what the most common causes are. And then they'll go straight to doing specific testing based on what's most likely the cause. The reason why they would do that is because obviously we want to find the problem as fast as possible, because we want to be productive, and the faster we find the problem, the less expensive it is for our customer. So let's say it's got a 302 and a 300. I'm going to suspect that the cylinder number 2 is an issue. Let's call it a Toyota Corolla. I know that the most common cause of a cylinder 2 misfire on a Toyota is likely a ignition coil. So one tech might decide to unplug all the coils and do an ohm test and see if number 2 is way out of whack. I myself, seeing how a Corolla is going to be a little 4-cylinder, it's a 10 millimeter bolt and 1 clip. I'm going to unbolt cylinder number 2 coil, cylinder number 1 coil, and I'm going to move them. And then I'm going to restart the car, and I'm going to get in my scan tool and monitor data. And if my misfire just moved from 2 to 1, I'm done. I know it needs a coil.
Yeah.
Now, if it stays misfiring on cylinder number 2, I know it's something else. So then I might take the coils back up, and I might move the plug, do the same thing. That doesn't work. I might get my compressor tester out or my borescope, or and look down in the cylinder, see if I can see intake or exhaust valve problems. And then if that's not it, then you got to go to the next step. Then you're like, well, shoot, what could we verified the coil's good, verified the engine's good by doing compression tests. What's likely the next cause is probably going to be fuel. So then we might unplug the injectors, start ohming injectors to see if there's an issue. So there's a whole path you go down. It's kind of like a process of elimination, if that makes sense.
Yeah, cool. No, that answers that. What spoke to me too is my own example. I'm not from the automotive industry, as you guys know. Come from marketing, but I am a DIYer. I bought that 2012 Yukon that we've had in a couple videos, and when I bought it, the guy I bought it from said the entire time he's owned it, the cruise control never worked. So me being a DIYer, although I work around some of the best techs in the state, thought a little prideful, I'm going to go figure this out on my own. Spent a couple hours Googling it, YouTubing it, found a form where a guy had a Sierra with same model and or same year, and he said it was a brake position sensor. So I called O'Reilly's and bought a standard brand brake position sensor, threw it in, thinking I'm a hot shot, went on the freeway on the way home, and it still didn't work, didn't fix it. So a couple more hours of trying to Google it. I couldn't figure it out. So I brought it in, talked to these guys, and Justin, our 20-year, tenured tech, said, yeah, it's the brake position sensor. And I said, no, it can't be. I already bought one and threw it in. And he's like, yeah, but it's because you bought a standard. They're trash. Go and buy a GM one. And so we did that. I bought a GM one, threw it in, and it fixed it immediately. So I know that just because a part's a brand new part doesn't mean it's a good part. Second, why spend hours wasting your time when you can have a tech solve your issue in 5 minutes because of his experience?
Yeah, that's a good example. Honestly, aftermarket parts are fine, but in some applications, they're not. And the only way to know that is to have had years and years of experience of doing something similar to that. I can't tell you how many times we've put an aftermarket part in a car. And of course, when you change a part, you assume it's going to be right and work. And then that doesn't fix the problem. Then you go down a whole path of looking at what next just to find out that part not be wrong or just doesn't work. And that's that case, So I use standard parts and quite often. But in your particular vehicle, as soon as you started talking about that one, it reminded me. I bet you it's a brake position switch, and I bet you he changed it and either didn't adjust it properly or put an aftermarket part in. So in that particular case, you do have to use the GM part, or else you'll always have an issue. You know,
Yeah.
I actually have changed that brake position sensor on a GM to fix the brake lights not working.
Oh.
And then had their cruise control not work. So
Yeah.
I solved one problem, caused another one. That just takes you down a whole path of misery, but it is what it is, you know. But there's often times that you could do that. Google it. It's likely this part. The part was probably what, $30?
Yeah.
Put it in, and you're the hero, and it works. So I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying there's a time and a place for it. And in that case, it was probably worth it. You learned something.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I learned that my time's a little bit more valuable than that. I tried to save $80 and cost myself quite a bit more than that. Well, you just kind of answered this next question people ask, but a lot of questions on aftermarket versus OEM parts. When do you know which one to buy?
Oh, shoot. I honestly, I have to rely on my techs a lot on that. I've got a lot of knowledge up in this brain. You know, I've been doing this 31 years now. So honestly, how we compile when to use an aftermarket part and when not is trial by error. You know, so our first time doing a job and having something go bad is frustrating. But what we usually take from it is what went wrong and why, and more important, what we're going to do differently the next time. So, for instance, Dorman. Dorman is an aftermarket brand that when they hit the market years ago, used to be pretty decent. So they started producing aftermarket window regulators, oil cooler hoses, quite a few of the things that maybe back towards the end of the 90s, you always had to call the dealer for. And now the aftermarket community started to stock them, they fit good and all that. Now you move forward to today, if you say the word Dorman in one of our shops to one of the techs, they'll either laugh or run you out of there, you know what I mean? And so you just kind of gotta, it's just experience, you know. For a client, you know, they're fixing their vehicle once in a great while, you know, maybe every couple years they try to do something. We're working on dozens of vehicles all day, every day. So between us in the office and then all of our techs, we just have to utilize each other's knowledge for them to note. So if my technician is recommending an exhaust manifold, it's his job to tell me if there's a case that he remembers where we need to use the OE part versus whatever part I can find. If he doesn't leave me a note to look up and use a factory part, I'm going to source the part from wherever I can find it to where I can, you know, keep the price as good as I can for the customer. If that makes sense. So, so it's just a combination of just trial and error, and then just knowledge of us in the office. Hey, I remember where I sold this part and it came back a week later, or it didn't work at all. We hate that stuff, just so you know. If I order in a part and waste my tech's time, or even worse, if I order in a part and my customer has to bring it back, kind of prideful. We don't like those things.
Yeah.
So we remember those things and we document them, and our technicians do as well, because as much as we don't want to waste their time, customers' time, technicians are, they make their, the difference between a technician that makes a ton of money and a technician that makes okay money is how much work they can get done in a day. And so if you get them a part that they don't necessarily want, you're not their best friend that day.
Yeah,
so,
I've seen that.
So our techs do a pretty good job of saying, hey, don't forget to not, you know, that we got to have the OE seal on this so that we don't have this issue. Or, hey, remember when I took that whole dash out and put that Dorman mode door actuator in, and it lasted 4 days and I had to take the whole dash out. Would you please get me the GM part or whatever, you know what I mean? So, so hopefully that answers the question. There's not really an answer that I could tell the general public when they should buy aftermarket or OE.
Yeah.
I would say 90% of the time we're using aftermarket parts, but not all aftermarket parts are the same either.
Yeah.
You know, we don't buy a lot of base level parts from the O'Reillys, Napas, AutoZones of the world. We use a lot of like factory motor parts, World Packs, Parts Authority, kind of people that are more catered towards those of us that are doing it all day, every day. They just have a little bit higher level parts in stock.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Just to recap, you know, if you want to fix something yourself, I don't think there's any harm in it. You know, I think I've said this in another video. I think it just takes a little bit of common sense of you got to understand what your time is worth, and if it's something you want to do, it's not often that we have cars coming in that people have really hurt anything. But there are some cases where people have bought hundreds of dollars worth of parts and spent a couple of weeks of driving their wife crazy because they don't have one of their vehicles running, and then they bring it to us and it actually costs them more to have us fix it than if they would have brought it in the beginning. But those are rare cases, you know. So if it's something simple, I say do it. And then honestly, there's lots of shops like ours. I have no issue at all with a do-it-yourselfer reaching out to me and say, hey, I've got this, I did this, I'm running into this problem, you got any advice for me? If I know right off the top of my head and I don't have to go bother a tech, that advice is free and I enjoy doing it. You know what I mean? So you're not hurting anything to reach out to some of us that have been doing it. So I say send it, you know, and then if it starts getting into something complicated and stuff, just know when to stop. We had a Honda come in the Ogden shop the other day that customer decided to change his own alternator. Oh. He missed one of the lower bolts, pulled out a pry bar, pried the alternator off because he thought it was stuck, and the alternator came off with the lower bolt and a piece of his engine block. Oof. So not only did he need an alternator, but he needed an engine. That's like worst case scenario. So do-it-yourselfers, you shouldn't own a big pry bar. Pry bars aren't for under the hood. So just know, if it seems crazy, just don't do it, you know? And if it's just, you know, oh, I'm going to change this filter right here, this battery right here, I'm going to change this coil sitting right here. Yeah, what's the harm, you know? Yeah. But sure. Don't go buy hundreds or thousands of dollars worth of parts and hope it works. That's when it's time to probably, you know, spend the $100, $200, $300 to have the guys that do it all day diagnose it.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, sweet. No, YouTube's been really nice to us. Thank you guys for all your positive comments. We'll keep listening to your questions and making videos as we can.
Actually really good. You guys doing an awesome job.
You sound surprised. We're YouTubers
like
now.
6 in the morning.
I'm a little surprised.